I mentioned this series a couple of videos ago to use for a comparison to one of the greatest parody series of all time, in my opinion. And while I've had my slump here and there, I've been hit with inspiration to actually go a bit more into this anime. I have a lot more I wanted to say about this than I originally thought I did, and I feel it'd be a decent companion piece to the Fruit of Evolution video to really write home the best and worst aspects of this author. I got a cheat skill in another world and became unrivaled in the real world too, or Iseleve for short. It's a series that I think personifies the downsides of its author's ability. As I said in the Fruit of Evolution video, it attempts to take on a more realistic approach overall. However, the first flaw that you'll notice with this series is that whenever it is about to do something perfectly with its writing, the author always does something that throws it off. Take, for example, one of the biggest problems that this series has, how the Otherworld interacts with Yuya for character writing. Iseleve has one of the strongest starts to a series that goes roughly like this. Yuya is introduced at the right place to quickly display his personality in a way that isn't too overbearing, but shows he's not really able to do anything, and he immediately gets his shit kicked in. It's a poetic start to display its protagonist's struggles and serves as a way to show the viewer why he's so stuck in his ways mentally. It's all really well done, and it lulls you into this train of thought that makes you think it'll continue this way, especially if you're someone who has seen other works by the same creator and notice how they're pretty consistent with their writing overall. All of this build up into the gimmick for the series was paced and written well, but once we actually arrive there, everything starts unraveling. The introduction to the Otherworld was pretty good, and I even believe the whole leveling system within the series logically makes sense for what we're shown. Even the whole encounter Yuya has with the Blood Ogre gaining his initial boost of 100 levels, and the absolute fear he experiences during it was handled really well. However, what happens after this is what really knocks things out of whack. No, it's not the fact that Yuya becomes buff and grows like 2 feet overnight, or how his personality is still the same after that. It's the fact that quite literally everything after this point is handed to Yuya without much of an effort. Get fired from your job? Looks like you never have to work again. Your school life is in the gutter? Get invited to a prestigious school that you have no qualifications for whatsoever just because you saved a girl. Your family tries to kill you. Give them a slap on the wrist and gain a new family member. While that's mostly me being facetious and paraphrasing, that's what happens in the first 5 episodes of this anime. Had this been a parody series like the Fruit of Evolution, this would be a pretty good way to deal with non-serious bits of the story to make way for something played straight, but the problem is that this series isn't a joke. Iseleve shows where its author is out of their depth, especially with how they're presenting Yuya as an overpowered character. The first time he picks up a weapon, he immediately masters it, and the same goes for a lot of things in the series. It could have been a lot more interesting had they made an effort to show more time passing throughout the first episode, getting used to things and ending up with a rudimentary understanding of how everything works by the end of it. It would have worked really well with the basic setup of the series, especially with how it acts as if Yuya is gaining more confidence by going to the other world, but that's where we stumble upon the most major problem with the series. Yuya gained a beautiful body in the span of at least one night, and it makes sense that he would have no confidence for a while, but he doesn't really gain any of this until the end of the season, where it feels super out of place because of how it happens. Not only does it feel out of place, but up until then, his confidence is handled very inconsistently within the series. Even with the scene in question, the heroine of the series says that he hasn't really changed, which is why it feels off. When he's in the Otherworld, to some degree it makes sense for him to be acting more confident because no one knows him there, but he doesn't act much like himself when interacting with the Otherworld's inhabitants. He even has this one moment in Japan where his fear and confidence gets the better of him, but it doesn't feel like it belongs when he was shown like a completely different person an episode prior, even when you take into account his traumas. The most bizarre part of the series, and frankly something that shouldn't be in it whatsoever, is how, after Yuya physically changed, everyone outside of people that are plot relevant treats him as this beautiful Adonis type character who is simply complimented for existing. I get that it's trying to point out Yuya's insecurities, but it's done so poorly. you'll hear people commenting on how beautiful he is upwards of like 50 times in an episode when he's in Japan. I honestly feel like if he was as insecure as this is trying to portray him, this would be a living hell for him rather than something that's feeling mildly unpleasant because he doesn't believe them, especially when the series makes it a point that he can hear all of them speaking. This anime does have a lot of good points to its name, but because of how it handles the writing, there's only one part in the series that I can confidently say doesn't get fucked up. On the Japan side of things, we spend quite a lot of time with Yuya and his classmates, and it all feels organic. They interact with each other in a believable way, and I feel they were reasonably written well enough for the viewer to care about them. One of the highlights of this anime was the off-campus school trip, where you get a lot of time to warm up to those characters. It's just a single episode, but I think it's probably one of the best ones out of the entire season. Had this series handled Yuya's otherworldly adventures differently, this part in the story would have been such a strong support for the narrative, since it would have showcased all of his personal growth. Look, I don't mean to rag too hard on this series because, at the end of the day, I do like it, but this one is just full of wasted potential. If you watch it, I feel like you'll understand where I'm coming from, because you notice how every really good point in its writing is just so close to being something super enjoyable. But then something has to come and ruin it, and it does this on a pretty predictable cycle. It's such a shame to see Millipensi's good animation work go to waste for something that's constantly edging you with how it has so many good ideas that get poorly executed. I really do feel like this series would have potentially been the best thing this author has written. If it had just a slight change in its direction, it could have fixed every fault in its execution, since I feel like a majority of the issues just comes from the series gimmick itself. It will always be saddening to know just how close to amazing it really was. Seriously, if you pay attention to it well enough, you notice that like only one thing needed to be changed at any given point in this. That change could have been done to make it closer to parody, or have a stronger foundation as a straightforward series. But the fact that it didn't really commit to either is what makes this the most disappointing thing. The person that made this does have a lot of potential in writing, but this series really showcases why their more recent things frustrate me. I just want to see them release a story to their fullest potential, to where it doesn't feel like they're holding themselves back by certain choices.